My parents told me my daughter Emma wasn't mature enough to join the annual Hartwell family reunion in Blueridge Valley. She was the valedictorian of her graduating class with a 4.0 GPA and early admission to Yale. 1. I discovered the real reason they didn't want her there. I realized my family had been living a lie for 18 years, and I never saw them the same way again. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. How could loving grandparents exclude their brilliant granddaughter from a family gathering? How could people who claimed to be proud of her achievements suddenly decide she wasn't ready for adult company? The answer is darker than I ever imagined, and it changed everything I thought I knew about the people who raised me. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. My name is Rebecca Hartwell Morrison. I'm 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a pretty normal family. Sure, we had our quirks, our little dramas, our holiday tensions, doesn't every family? But I genuinely believed that at the core, we loved and supported each other. I live in Willowbrook, a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside of Riverside City, with my husband David and our daughter Emma. David works as an engineer for Meridian Tech, and I'm a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit called Community Connect. We're not wealthy, but we're comfortable. We have a 3-bedroom house with a small garden, 2 cars that are paid off, and enough saved up to help Emma with college expenses. Emma is our only child, and honestly, she's everything you could hope for in a teenager. I know every parent says that, but with Emma, it's actually true. She's never been the type to rebel or cause trouble. Even as a toddler, she was thoughtful, curious, always asking questions, and genuinely listening to the answers. By middle school, it was clear that Emma was academically gifted. Not just smart, lots of kids are smart, but truly exceptional. She had this ability to understand complex concepts quickly and then explain them to others in ways that made perfect sense. Her teachers started recommending advanced placement courses, gifted programs, summer enrichment camps. But here's what made me most proud: Emma never let her intelligence make her arrogant or isolated. She tutored struggling classmates, organized study groups, and somehow managed to be both the smartest kid in the room and one of the most well-liked. She volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend, organized fundraisers for local food banks, and spent her summers working at a day camp for underprivileged kids. When Emma started high school at Willowbrook Academy, she immediately threw herself into everything: student government, debate team, National Honor Society, volunteer coordinator for 3 different charities. She maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, while working 15 hours a week at the local bookstore to save money for college. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Fletcher, called her the most well-rounded student I've seen in 23 years of education. Emma's SAT scores were in the 99th percentile. She was accepted to 7 universities, including Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. Yale offered her a partial academic scholarship that would cover nearly half her tuition. The valedictorian speech she gave at graduation in May was about the importance of using your privileges and opportunities to lift others up. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Even David, who rarely gets emotional, was wiping his eyes and telling everyone within earshot, "That's my daughter." So when my mother called that Tuesday morning in June with her concerns about Emma's maturity, I was genuinely confused. This was the same Emma who had been helping plan family gatherings since she was 12. The same Emma who mediated disputes between her younger cousins and somehow got them all to cooperate. The same Emma who, just the year before, had organized a surprise anniversary party for my parents that required coordinating with dozens of relatives across 3 states. To understand why this phone call was so shocking, you need to understand the Hartwell family tradition. Every year since I was 19, we've gathered at my uncle's property in Blueridge Valley for what we call the Hartwell family reunion weekend. Uncle Thomas inherited this beautiful lakefront property from our grandmother, complete with a main house and 3 smaller cabins scattered around the shoreline. The reunion typically includes about 25 to 30 people. My parents, Dorothy and Harold Hartwell, my younger brother Jake and his wife Amanda with their 3 kids, my older sister Nicole and her husband Ryan with their twin boys. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Linda, my parents' siblings and their families, and various cousins who drift in and out depending on their schedules. It's always been positioned as this wholesome, multi-generational bonding experience. We fish, play cards, have barbecues, tell stories around the campfire. The kids swim in the lake while the adults catch up on each other's lives. It's Norman Rockwell meets summer camp, complete with s'mores and sing-alongs. Emma has been attending these reunions since she was born. Some of my favorite family photos are from these weekends. Emma as a toddler, covered in dirt and grinning at the camera. Emma at 8, teaching her younger cousins how to fish. Emma at 15, leading a group hike and pointing out different bird species to anyone who would listen. She's never been a problem at these gatherings. If anything, she's been an asset. She helps with meal prep, organizes activities for the younger kids, and somehow manages to bridge the gap between the adults and the teenagers who usually spend the entire weekend sulking in corners. If their phones. Last year's reunion was particularly special because Emma had just been accepted to Yale. My parents made a big deal about it, having her stand up during our traditional family updates dinner and tell everyone about her plan. My father actually got teary-eyed talking about how proud he was to have such an accomplished granddaughter. Emma represents the best of the Hartwell family, he said, raising his beer in a toast. Smart, hardworking, and kind. She's going to change the world. Everyone applauded. Emma blushed and thanked everyone for their support over the years. It was one of those perfect family moments that you want to bottle up and keep forever. So you can imagine my confusion when, just 10 months later, these same grandparents were suddenly concerned about her maturity level. The call came at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I was checking the clock, calculating whether I had time to finish my coffee before my first virtual meeting of the day. I was working from home that week, catching up on some projects before Emma and I left for a mother-daughter college preparation trip we'd been planning for months. Rebecca, dear, we need to talk about the reunion plans. My mother's voice had that particular quality it gets when she's about to deliver news she knows will be unpopular. Growing up, I learned to recognize this tone. It usually preceded announcements like we're spending Christmas at Aunt Martha's this year, or your father and I have decided to redecorate your bedroom while you're at camp. Sure, Mom. What's going on? Do you need us to bring anything specific this year? I was already mentally running through our usual contributions to the reunion. David always handled the fishing gear and boat maintenance. I typically coordinated the group grocery shopping and meal planning. Emma usually organized activities for the kids and helped with general setup. Well, actually, that's what I wanted to discuss. We've been thinking maybe Emma should sit this one out this year. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually had to sit down. Sit it out. What do you mean, sit it out? She's just, well, Rebecca, you know how these family gatherings can get. There's drinking, adult conversations, late nights, card games with money involved. Some of the cousins bring their college friends now, and you know how that crowd can be. We just don't think she's quite ready for that environment yet. I stared out my kitchen window at Mrs. Chen's rose garden, trying to process what I was hearing. Mrs. Chen was out there with her granddaughter, a girl about Emma's age, teaching her how to prune the bushes. 3 generations working together, sharing knowledge, enjoying each other's company. Mom, Emma is 18 years old. She's legally an adult. She's going to Yale in 2 months. Oh, we know she's smart, dear. Nobody's questioning her intelligence. But intellectual maturity and social maturity are 2 very different things. College is going to be a big adjustment for her. We just think it would be better if she stayed home this year, maybe focused on getting ready for school. There will be plenty of other reunions. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. In 18 years of these reunions, no one had ever been excluded for being too young or not mature enough. My cousin Jamie had been bringing his kids since they were infants. My nephew Tyler had been attending since he was 12, and he'd gotten into actual trouble at school for vandalizing the gym. Emma's cousin Connor had come last year at 17 and spent the entire weekend openly drinking beer that the adults pretended not to notice. But Emma valedictorian Emma, scholarship Emma. Volunteer Emma, she wasn't mature enough. What exactly are you worried about, Mom? Emma has been to 17 of these reunions. She's never caused a problem. If anything, she helps make them run more smoothly. Well, that's just it, dear. She's always been so responsible, so serious. We're worried that she might not be comfortable with some of the more relaxed aspects of the adult activities. You know how she can be about rules and doing the right thing. This was getting more confusing by the minute. Now Emma was being excluded not for being immature, but for being too mature, too responsible. Mom, I don't understand. Are you saying Emma can't come because she follows rules and makes good choices? It's not that simple, Rebecca. Look, we've already made the reservations and arranged the sleeping arrangements. It would be complicated to change everything now. Maybe next year, when she's had some college experience and has loosened up a bit, that's when something clicked. The way my mother said loosened up, the emphasis on adult activities. The sudden concern about Emma's rule-following nature. Mom, what exactly happens at these reunions that you don't want Emma to see? There was a pause. Too long of a pause. Nothing unusual, dear. Just normal family time. But you know how Emma can be. She notices things. She asks questions. We just want everyone to be able to relax and enjoy themselves without worrying about, well, without having to be on their best behavior every second. My hands started shaking. Actually shaking. Are you telling me that you don't want Emma at the family reunion because she might notice if people are doing something they shouldn't be doing? Rebecca, you're being dramatic. It's not about hiding anything. It's about letting adults be adults without having to worry about setting a perfect example every moment. Emma's a wonderful girl, but she's still very young in some ways, very idealistic. The word idealistic hung in the air like an accusation. As if having ideals, having standards, having a moral compass was somehow a character flaw that needed to be outgrown. I thought about all the times Emma had volunteered at the homeless shelter, how she'd come home talking about the people she'd met and the stories they'd shared. I thought about how she'd organized a school-wide campaign to collect winter coats for families in need, how she'd spent her own birthday money to buy supplies for the animal shelter. My mother was talking about this girl, this incredible, compassionate, brilliant girl, like she was naive. Like her goodness was something embarrassing that the family needed to be protected from. Mom, I'm going to hang up now, David, and I will discuss this and get back to you. Rebecca, please don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. We're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. We're just trying to have a nice, relaxing family weekend. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for 20 minutes, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Emma had been looking forward to this reunion for months. She'd already requested the time off from her bookstore job. She'd bought new books to read during the long car ride to Blueridge Valley. She'd been planning activities for her younger cousins, researching hiking trails, and talking about how excited she was to see everyone before leaving for college. How was I supposed to explain to her that her grandparents, the same grandparents who had bragged about her at last year's reunion, suddenly didn't want her there? I called David at work. Hey, how was the reunion planning call with your mom? David, something weird just happened. My parents don't want Emma to come to the reunion this year. What? Why not? They say she's not mature enough. They're worried about adult activities and think she might be uncomfortable with the drinking and late nights. There was silence on the other end of the line. Rebecca, Emma has been going to these things her entire life. She's seen adults drink at family gatherings since she was a toddler. What's different about this year? That's exactly what I want to know. I spent the rest of the morning going through photo albums from previous reunions, looking for clues I might have missed. What I found was 18 years of documentation showing Emma growing up in this family, participating in every tradition, being celebrated and included in everything. But as I looked more carefully, I started noticing things that hadn't registered before. In recent years, there were more photos of adults-only activities, more pictures taken late at night when the kids were supposedly asleep, more shots of people who looked like they'd been drinking heavily, making poor decisions, engaging in behavior that wouldn't normally be documented in family photos. And there were people in some of these photos that I didn't recognize, adults, who weren't family members, but who seemed to be very comfortable at our family gatherings. I decided to call my sister Nicole to see if she knew anything about this sudden change in reunion policies. "Hey, Nick, did Mom talk to you about the reunion plans?" "Oh, hey, Becca. Yeah, she called this morning. It sounds like it's going to be a great weekend. I can't wait. Did she mention anything about Emma?" There was a pause. What about Emma, Nicole? Did Mom tell you that Emma isn't invited this year?" Another pause, longer this time. Well, she mentioned that maybe the reunion was getting a little too adult-oriented for some of the younger family members. Emma is 18, Nicole. She's older than Connor was last year. She's going to college in 2 months. I know, Becca. I think Mom and Dad are just being overly cautious. You know how they can get. But there was something in Nicole's voice, something that suggested she knew more than she was saying. "Nicole, what's really going on? What happens at these reunions that my daughter can't see?" "Nothing, Becca. It's just you know how Emma is. She's so innocent, so trusting. Maybe Mom and Dad just want to protect that for a little while longer." Protect her from what? That's what I couldn't understand. What was there at a family reunion that required protection? But as the day went on, comments from previous reunions started coming back to me, little things that hadn't seemed significant at the time. My Uncle Thomas making jokes about what happens at the lake stays at the lake. My father telling Emma she should go to bed early on the last night because the adults need some time to themselves. My cousin Mark bringing friends who weren't family but who seemed to know everyone very well. And there were the phone calls, every year, in the weeks leading up to the reunion. There would be hushed phone conversations between my parents and other family members. Conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. Planning calls that I was never included in, despite being one of the main organizers. I had always assumed these were just typical family coordination calls, but now I was wondering if there was more to it. When Emma came home from work that afternoon, she was practically glowing. She'd had a great day at the bookstore, helping customers find books for their summer reading. And she was excited to talk about the reunion. "Mom, I was thinking about the reunion, and I had this idea for a scavenger hunt for the little kids. We could hide things around the property and make it educational, like they have to find different types of leaves or rocks or..." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw my face. "Mom, what's wrong?" I had been dreading this conversation all day. How do you tell your accomplished, excited daughter that her grandparents don't want her at a family gathering? How do you explain something that doesn't make sense to you either? "Emma, honey, we need to talk about the reunion." Her face immediately fell. "Did something happen? Is someone sick?" "No. Everyone's fine. It's just, there's been a change in plans." I watched as confusion, then hurt, then disbelief crossed her face as I explained what my mother had said. Emma sat quietly through the entire explanation, asking only a few clarifying questions. "So they think I'm not mature enough," that's what they said, "but I've been going to these reunions my entire life." "I know. And last year Grandpa Harold made that speech about how proud he was of me." I remember. Emma was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands. "Mom, is this because I don't drink, because I've never been interested in drinking or partying, because I actually care about school and my future?" The question broke my heart because it was so perceptive. Emma had always been the good kid in the family. While her cousins were getting into typical teenage trouble, Emma was volunteering and studying and working toward her goals. She'd never rebelled, never caused drama, never given anyone a reason to worry about her choices, and now it seemed like those very qualities were being held against her. "I don't know, sweetheart. I'm trying to understand it myself. Are you going to go without me?" This was the question I'd been asking myself all day. The reunion was a month away. David and I had been looking forward to it, especially because it would be one of our last big family gatherings before Emma left for College. But how could we go and enjoy ourselves knowing that Emma had been deliberately excluded? I don't think so, honey. If you're not welcome, then we're not going either. Emma shook her head immediately. No. Mom, you should go. You look forward to this every year. Don't miss it because of me. Emma, we're a family. We stick together. But I want to understand why this is happening. There has to be more to it than what they're telling us. That's my daughter. Even when she's hurt and confused, her first instinct is to solve the problem. To find the truth, to understand the bigger picture. What if I do some research, she suggested. What if I try to figure out what's really going on? And that's when I realized that my parents had made a crucial mistake. They were trying to exclude Emma because they were worried about her noticing things, asking questions, and being too responsible. But by excluding her, they had guaranteed that she would notice, ask questions, and use all of that responsibility and intelligence to figure out what they were trying to hide. Emma wasn't just going to accept this exclusion quietly. She was going to investigate it, and knowing my daughter, she was going to find answers. That evening, after David came home and we'd had a long discussion about the situation, I found Emma in her room with her laptop open, surrounded by notebooks and printed papers. What are you working on, sweetheart? I'm researching our family reunions, she said, looking up at me with that determined expression I knew so well. I'm going through all the social media posts, all the photos that have been shared over the years. I'm making a timeline of who attended when, what activities were documented. What changed over time? Emma, you don't have to, Mom, something doesn't add up. The reasons they gave you don't make sense. I've been thinking about it all afternoon, and I keep coming back to the same question. What changed between last year and this year? She turned her laptop screen toward me. She had created a detailed spreadsheet tracking reunion attendance, activities, and what she called notable incidents over the past 5 years. Look at this, she said, pointing to her notes. 3 years ago, cousin Tyler got arrested for underage drinking 2 weeks after the reunion, but nobody suggested he shouldn't come the next year. 2 years ago, Connor got into that fight at school and was suspended, but he was still invited. Last year, my cousin Jenny brought her boyfriend who ended up stealing money from Uncle Thomas's wallet, but nobody suggested limiting +1s. I looked at the data Emma had compiled. She was right. There had been actual problems, actual immature behavior from actual family members, and none of it had resulted in exclusions or policy changes. But me, Emma continued. I graduate as valedictorian, get into Yale, work 2 jobs, volunteer regularly, and somehow I'm the one who's not mature enough. What are you thinking, Emma? I'm thinking they're not worried about my maturity, Mom. I think they're worried about my integrity. The word hit me like a slap. Integrity. Of course, Emma had always been the family member who asked uncomfortable questions, who pointed out when things didn't seem fair, who couldn't ignore problems just because they were inconvenient. When she was 12, she'd asked why Uncle Thomas always seemed to have more money than anyone else despite not having a job. When she was 14, she'd questioned why some of the family friends at the reunion seemed to know details about our lives but never talked about their own families. When she was 16, she'd commented on how strange it was that certain conversations always stopped when the younger family members walked into the room. I had always been proud of Emma's moral compass, but now I was starting to wonder if that same moral compass was exactly what my parents were afraid of. Emma, I want you to be careful with this research. If there's something going on that your grandparents don't want you to know about, it might be dangerous to dig too deep. Emma looked at me with those serious, intelligent eyes that had been asking the right questions her entire life. Mom, if it's dangerous, don't you think we need to know about it? Don't you think we deserve to know what kind of family we're really part of? And that's when I realized that my parents had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because if there's one thing you don't want to do to a future Yale student with a 4.0 GPA and a talent for research, it's give her a mystery to solve. Emma wasn't going to let this go, and neither was I. What we discovered over the next few weeks would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The investigation was just beginning. The next morning, Emma woke up with the determination Of someone who had been personally challenged, she'd always been methodical, but now she was on a mission. While I was getting ready for work, she was already at her computer, coffee in hand. Surrounded by printouts and sticky notes, "Mom, I found something interesting," she said without looking up from her screen. I walked over to see what she'd discovered. Emma had pulled up the Facebook pages and Instagram accounts of various family members going back several years. She'd created a digital timeline of reunion photos. And what she'd found was troubling. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to her laptop screen. "Every year, there are 2 sets of photos from the reunion, the family-friendly ones that get posted publicly. And then these other ones that only get shared in private groups or tagged much later." She clicked through a series of screenshots. The public photos showed exactly what I remembered. Families fishing, kids playing, everyone looking wholesome and happy. But the private photos told a different story. These were posted in a private Facebook group called Blueridge Weekends, Emma explained. "I only found them because cousin Tyler forgot to adjust his privacy settings on some shares." The private photos showed adults who were clearly intoxicated, engaged in what looked like gambling, and in some cases, with people who definitely weren't family members. There were shots of poker games with stacks of cash, bottles of expensive liquor, and faces I didn't recognize but who seemed very comfortable with my relatives. "Emma, how did you find this group?" I cross-referenced everyone who attended the reunions with their social media connections. I found a pattern of private groups and hidden photo albums. "Mom, this isn't just family members having a few drinks. This looks like some kind of organized gambling operation." My stomach dropped. "Gambling operation? Look at these timestamps. The poker games are happening during the reunion weekends, but they're not just family members playing. There are other people there, people with expensive cars and jewelry, and look at this." She pointed to a comment thread under one of the photos. Uncle Thomas had written, "Another successful weekend at the lake. Our Yale-bound niece would definitely not approve of these study sessions." They had been talking about Emma. They'd been planning to exclude her for months, maybe longer. "There's more, Mom. I found financial records." "Financial records? Emma, how did you?" "Public records. Uncle Thomas's property taxes have been mysteriously current despite him being unemployed for 3 years. Dad's business has been getting cash investments from sources that don't appear to have legitimate businesses. And look at this," she showed me a screenshot of a property deed. Uncle Thomas didn't inherit that lake house from Grandma. He bought it 2 years ago, in cash, for $1.2 million. The room started spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my family was crumbling. The wholesome reunions, the family bonding, the traditional values they'd always preached, it was all a cover for something much darker. "Emma, we need to call your father. We need to figure out what to do with this information." But Emma was already 3 steps ahead of me. She'd printed everything, organized it chronologically, and created a comprehensive report that would make any investigative journalist proud. "Mom, I think our family reunion is actually a front for illegal gambling, and I think they wanted me gone because they knew I'd figure it out." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.